All right, joining me now, he is our NFL reporter here at PFF, a colleague, a friend, and first-time guest here on the show. It is Doug Kyed. Doug, it's been an action-packed 2 weeks so far in the NFL. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for finally having me on here, Ari. Always great to talk to you. And yeah, it's been a fun season already, and we're only 2 weeks in.
I know it's been unreal. A lot of crazy games, a lot of insane comebacks in week 2 that we saw. And we also, unfortunately, finally had our first major injury, I would say, of the season with Trey Lance in San Francisco. And I want to start there because, when Jimmy Garoppolo initially agreed to come back to San Francisco, I thought it was a bit of a bad decision because I know a quarterback injury is going to happen somewhere. I just never thought it would happen in San Francisco. So it's a bit ironic. But let me start with the Lance side of things. I think we all understood going into the season that this was going to take some time for Lance. You cannot have any overreactions with him. The upside and the ceiling is what everyone was hoping would be the end result. We're now not going to see that this year. And I know that you've spoken to a bunch of people about this situation and what it means for the 49ers. You have an article up at pff.com. What have you heard about all of this from people around the league?
Yeah, I think that the overall message around the league is that unfortunately, I feel bad saying this for Trey Lance, but this really doesn't affect the 49ers this season that much. I think that some people actually think that Jimmy Garoppolo is currently the better quarterback than Trey Lance, that Jimmy Garoppolo gives the 49ers a better chance to win in the interim, in the short term. Obviously, this has long-term ramifications for Lance. And actually, I was a little bit surprised that the 49ers Super Bowl odds went from plus 1,600 to plus 2,000 after Trey Lance's injury. So at least Vegas thinks that this lowers the chances of the 49ers winning a Super Bowl, which to some degree makes sense. I think that they have a lower ceiling now that Jimmy Garoppolo is at quarterback, but I also think that they have a significantly higher floor. And that's really the messaging from around the NFL as well. And a lot of people still think that Jimmy Garoppolo is an above average quarterback, that the 49ers are still in good shape right now with Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback. The 49ers, they like Trey Lance. They think he's got tons of upside. They believe that he can be an elite quarterback, but I think that even they would admit that he was not at that point early in the season here.
I put out this tweet on Monday. Trey Lance has really barely played in the last few years, right? 2019 was his last full year playing. 2020 was the COVID year in college, only had one game. Last year was his rookie year. Jimmy Garoppolo played for the most part. And this year, played in week 1 against the Bears. It was in a crazy rain monsoon game. And then he gets injured early here in week 2. So he really has barely played in the NFL so far. And we all knew it would be a bit of a project for him to get to where we want him to be with Kyle Shanahan. Just jumping ahead a little bit, come next year, do you think it's just an open door once again? Welcome back. You're the starter again here in San Francisco.
I think it has to be, given what they gave up to get Trey Lance, given all the messaging this offseason that it's his team, he's the starter. Jimmy Garoppolo is off on a side field throwing away from the rest of the team. But the 49ers need insurance next year, and they need insurance that's as good, close to as good as what Jimmy Garoppolo is providing this year. And on the show that I do with Brad Spielberger, PFF Wire, I was going through some of the options that the 49ers have this offseason as far as free agent quarterbacks go. Basically, every single fringe starting quarterback in the NFL that you can think of is a free agent this offseason. So that actually works out pretty well for the 49ers. Sam Darnold is a free agent. Teddy Bridgewater, some of the guys that the 49ers are well acquainted with, like CJ Beathard is a free agent. Like, seriously, look at the list. Almost every single guy who's started games around the NFL that might not be a starter right now, but could be, is a free agent. So I think that what the 49ers wind up having to do is signing one of those guys, trying to roll with Trey Lance. If it doesn't work out, then you do definitely need a dependable fill-in behind him.
You mentioned Brad. He was on the show here last week. I was having this discussion with him about Dak Prescott's injury, that I feel like teams really have to start prioritizing the backup quarterback position, right? I think Philadelphia has done the best at that when it was Nick Foles and then Jalen Hurts and now Gardner Minshew. But it feels like San Francisco is very lucky that Jimmy Garoppolo is back here. I actually have this video from February. If you would have told me that Jimmy Garoppolo is starting for the 49ers in week 3, I would have never believed you, especially when he did this. Let's play this video.
Yeah, I'll miss you guys. So thank you guys again. Faithful, thank you very much for everything. It's been crazy, man. Just all the comebacks at Levi's, comebacks on the road, ups and downs. It's been a hell of a ride, guys. I love you guys. So.
I mean, like he was gone already. I mean, he was saying goodbye to the reporters, to the fans, looking back at all the memories, and here he is in week 3, back with the team. Even though the team tried very hard to move on from him, I know there was a surgery in the middle of all of that, but he's back there, and I think everyone would agree San Francisco is still very much in the picture there in the NFC. They actually have back-to-back primetime games here coming up with the Broncos on Sunday night and then the Rams on Monday night next week. So we'll get to see him in the spotlight right away here in these next couple of weeks with the 49ers. I think the two quarterbacks in the NFL, besides for Lance and Garoppolo, that were talked about the most this offseason with question marks around them were probably Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. And both these guys are off to a really impressive starts. They're a combined 4-0. Let me start off with Jalen Hurts. We just saw him on Monday night. He is the highest graded passer among all quarterbacks so far this season at PFF with a 90.8 grade. In my eyes, I mean, he's improved his pocket presence, his accuracy, I mean, the way he's working the middle of the field. I think he's done it better than he ever has before. Running ability will always be there. Do you think this is something that will stay here with Jalen Hurts? Are you a believer that this is for real right now and Philadelphia is a legitimate threat right now in the NFC?
Yeah, I think it's relatively sustainable right now, and maybe I'll wind up eating my words there. But it's just the fact that Jalen Hurts has improved as a quarterback every single year since he first started at Alabama way back when. I think it was like 2016 or something like that. If you look at his PFF grades, they are better every single year. And now it seems like he's taken a significant jump this season. Now that they've got AJ Brown in the mix, they've got all the weapons around him. Obviously, they've got the offensive line. I think that they're really built to succeed with Jalen Hurts. And I know that given his reputation, it might be hard for people to think of Jalen Hurts as being a top 10 quarterback, of being a top 8 quarterback. But I do think that he's got that ability. He's got that upside. He's one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL. And as you mentioned, he's really improved his passing. And that's why he is PFF's #1 graded passer in the NFL right now. So I actually think that obviously we'll get into Tua in a second here, but long term, this might be even a little bit more sustainable with Jalen Hurts, given his rushing ability and given the fact that now he's shown this in Nick Sirianni's offense 2 years in a row, and then he was able to take a significant jump this year in the same offense.
The fact that Philadelphia came into this last offseason with 3 first-round picks and never showed an interest in any of the other quarterbacks told me a lot about what they think about Jalen Hurts. They still have 2 come next year, but they've been all in with him so far. And you got to give credit to Howie Roseman, as you mentioned, bringing in an A.J. Brown, who is his very close friend. The offensive line is still great. If this is how Jalen Hurts is playing, I mean, you can't deny the Eagles are one of the better teams in the NFC right now, and they've been showing it. That was a very very impressive performance there on Monday night against the Vikings. The other quarterback we mentioned was Tua. We spoke a lot about him in the offseason. I think Tua Non is very, very excited right now with how he has started the year. 469 yards, 6 touchdowns, an incredible comeback on Sunday against Baltimore. I guess same question. Are you buying in that this is the real thing with Tua and the Dolphins could keep this up?
I think this is the real thing with Tua in Mike McDaniel's offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle around him. And I mean, that is the reality right now. So I think that Tua can have a ton of success this season. I do still think that there's some limitations there. He wasn't nearly as good in week 1, and that might be, the difference between how I feel about Jalen Hurts and how I feel about Tua Tagovailoa right now, just because Jalen Hurts has done it 2 weeks in a row now. And Tua definitely had the bigger week 2. He had the biggest game out of what either one of these quarterbacks has had so far. Massive performance on Sunday. But I would like to see it moving forward here. And, this is maybe a conversation for another day, but Tua is going to need a contract relatively soon because Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow are probably going to sign contract extensions after this season. If Tua puts up big numbers this year, he's going to want $40, $45 million a year. And then at that point, the Dolphins have to decide, okay, can we replicate this with someone younger, cheaper? Can someone else produce this way with these high-powered wide receivers around him, with the quarterback? Obviously, there's an element there of we've seen it with Tua, so we'd like to move forward with that. I could certainly understand that from the Dolphins, but I think that it'll be very interesting to see how this year plays out, whether we see more of Week 1 or if we see more of Week 2.
The thing is, we mentioned before the Eagles have 2 first-round picks next year. The Dolphins had 2 first-round picks. They lost one of those
Yep.
because of the tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. I think that definitely will play a big role with them. With whatever happens here of Tua, let's just say he has an above-average year. Do you keep on moving forward with him if those contract talks do come up? You don't have the capital, enough capital at least, to try to get a different quarterback come next year. I do think the commitment they've showed him, and I think Mike McDaniel is a big part of this, is very important because, like, his first year, there was a Ryan Fitzpatrick element. The second year was the Sean Watson element. This year, it's like, we want you. You are our guy. And we brought in all these pieces. I just remember the knock when he came out of college from Alabama was that his receivers were so good that they're getting open by 5 to 10 yards, whether it was Henry Ruggs, Jerry Judy. And the response was, that's not going to happen in the NFL. Well, I guess it could happen in the NFL when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waller and all these speedy guys on offense. And that definitely did happen on Sunday. I want to see it happen again. Like you said, they have Buffalo this week, who have been a juggernaut so far. What a matchup that's going to be. But could you imagine Mike McDaniel's first 3 wins of his career are Bill Belichick, John Harbaugh, and Sean McDermott? That would be absolutely wild. I think that is definitely the game of the week. It's a shame that it's at 1 o'clock on Sunday, but a lot of people will be tuning in to that game coming up this week. Let me shift over to the Giants, who their quarterback as well had a lot of questions coming into the year of Daniel Jones. I wouldn't say he's been impressive so far this year, but they're 2-0. He's made some smart decisions. The guy I want to talk about, though, is Kenny Golladay, because he does not have a touchdown since signing with them last year on a $72 million contract. David Sills is out here leading the teams in receiver snaps. And then on Sunday, he plays just 2 snaps. He's not targeted at all. And the receiver of the largest cap hit among all players this season is Kenny Golladay with a $21.1 million cap hit here this year. Do you feel like this is something that is going to eventually blow up in the Giants' face? Like, I feel like it already is, but you can't just leave him on the bench. Am I wrong over here?
Yeah, probably not. The there's not a lot of recourse here there for the Giants though, unless they're just willing to eat $4.5 million, something like that, in cap space. Like, it's not just dead cap. That is money that is going to be subtracted from the Giants' cap space. So it's a tough pill to swallow if they do eventually decide to release him. Maybe obviously a team would probably sign him at that point, but that other team really would have no reason to sign him to more than a veteran minimum salary, since he would already be getting paid by the Giants. No team is going to trade for him at this point with his current salary and his current contract. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you just keep him as depth. Maybe you just kind of let him go home. I think that honestly, that's the better course of action right now than cutting him and taking on that cap hit that they would have to take on. The one thing that's interesting to me about David Sills, and I was talking to someone about this. I forgot who it was. I think it was Nathan Yonke recently. David Sills and Daniel Jones are very good friends. It's kind of a similar connection to what Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp have, and certainly not comparing David Sills as a talent to Cooper Kupp, but I do think that that's one of the reasons why we're seeing David Sills get snaps. I think that, there could be some sort of a connection developing there between Daniel Jones and David Sills, because those guys have been practicing together for a number of years. David Sills has a very interesting story. He was like a 5-star quarterback recruit when he was coming out of high school. Didn't work out for him, I believe, at West Virginia, so he converted over to wide receiver. So he's kind of an interesting player. He's been sitting around on practice squads for a few years now. But yeah, I mean, if you want to do like a deep stash on a dynasty team or something, David Sills might actually wind up getting quite a few targets with his good buddy Daniel Jones.
Yeah, he outsnapped everybody, like Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney, like everybody on that offense in the week too. Just going back to Golladay for a second, there are people who believe also in his last year with Detroit, he only played 5 games, that he really just checked out that year just to make sure he gets to free agency. There was also a bit of a Matt Patricia issue, which happened with a few players there. But point is, he got to free agency, and if you remember, his market started off really slow. and then eventually took a visit with the Giants and Dave Gettleman, who was essentially on the hot seat that year, overpaid to get him. I don't think any other team was looking to do that. And now here we are a year plus later, and this new regime walked into a terrible cap situation. But he's there and he hasn't really played much. Very curious to see what happens because you do have to worry about the injury risk if something happens there. And eventually you are stuck with that contract next year where there is an out in the offseason next year for this new regime. Let's talk about his old team, the Lions. Anyone who listens to the show knows I've been all in on this future for them for a while now. I don't think the big jump was going to happen this year, and I still don't think it will. But they're proving that they're a team that keeps on taking steps forward and keeps on moving forward. The Lions are averaging 35 and a half points per game so far through 2 games. Offensive coordinator Ben Johnson has done a great job. I mean, I guess let me just ask you, like the Lions, are you a believer in where they're going right now? This coaching staff, the talent they have on this roster. Do you see them being that very annoying team throughout this year that could end up winning 7, 8 games and make lives hard for everybody else in the league?
Yeah, I think they definitely could. And I was just going to say they'll probably be hovering around 500. I would assume by the end of the season. They already are right now at 1-1, and they've got a ton of talent on their team. It's a lot of young talent as well. I mean, we're seeing this offense produce this way without their first round pick. Jamison Williams still on NFI right now. He's expected to return around midseason, so that will give them another boost at midseason. But they've just drafted really well. You look at a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, a 4th-round pick who's looking like one of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now. And I would even say that, moving forward into next season, they've got significant upside as well, because as good as Jared Goff is playing, you have to assume that they're a team that's going to look at next year's draft and try to find that franchise quarterback. So if they've already got all this talent around them, if they're already producing the way they are, and then if they somehow wind up, adding one of these top quarterbacks in next year's draft, and there's expected to be right now 3 or 4 quarterbacks taken in the first round. If the Lions do finish around 500, might be kind of tough to get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, but could wind up, seeing Will Levis or someone else there in Detroit. It's definitely a team to watch for the future, and I would expect them to be competitive this year. And I would even say the NFC is kind of wide open this year. I think that a lot of people expected maybe the Panthers to be that 7th team that sneaks into the playoffs. If the Lions go 9-8, 8 or 9, somewhere around there, there's a possibility that they could sneak into the playoffs.
There is an avenue there for sure. I mean, like it is a very weak conference, and you are right. We talked a lot about the Panthers when they traded for Baker Mayfield. Maybe they could be that backdoor team who just makes it in. Often 0-2 start so far, and look, I mean, again, look at this Lions team. This is a tweet from the offseason, but the amount of young talent they have on offense, from DeAndre Swift, who's 23, Amon-Ra St. Brown is 22, Jamison Williams is 21, Hawkinson is 24. The offensive line, everyone is under 28 years old, and they haven't even been healthy so far on the offensive line this year, which is the crazier part. But they've built a really nice offense so far. And defensively, I mean, Aiden Hutchinson had 3 first-half sacks. Malcolm Rodriguez has been the best-rated rookie linebacker here at PFF. He's been starting for them, a 6th-round pick. So they have a ton of building blocks on this roster. You mentioned the quarterback before. People should keep in mind they also have 2 first-round picks next year as well because of that Matthew Stafford trade. So there is the ability to move up in a draft if they ever want to because of those 2 first-round picks. I think everyone would agree GM Brad Holmes, head coach Dan Campbell, the rest of the staff, they've done a tremendous job so far through a year and a half since getting there. Let me talk a little bit about some, I guess, recent news that happened. Mike Evans was suspended a game. His appeal was upheld today. This beef with Marshall Lattimore is like real. Like it's not just a one-time thing. This is 3 times now. He's gotten a couple of cheap shots in, if we're going to be real. But Lattimore has, for the most part, gotten the better of Evans on the field. And this is just me, Doug. If the Bucs have this option to eliminate Lattimore from a game, but it costs them Mike Evans getting out as well, I think they would take it, right?
Yeah, probably. And I guess it's good to see that the Saints can still get under everyone's skin, even after trading away C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was one of the best in the NFL at doing that. But yeah, I mean, it's a good trade-off. That being said, losing Mike Evans now against the Green Bay Packers is a significant hit for them, and Marshawn Lattimore did not get suspended. So, all in all, probably not the trade-off that you want to make there. And I mean, this Buccaneers wide receiver situation in general is pretty fascinating because 2-3 weeks ago, I think everyone was trying to figure out how all of these guys were going to share the field this season, where you've got Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Julio Jones, Russell Gage, and then suddenly Tom Brady's throwing to, Brashad Perriman and Jalen Darden and Scotty Miller. And now they've had to sign Cole Beasley off the street to go to their practice squad. He'll probably wind up playing on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. I think that all of this is just a lesson that there is no possible way to have enough wide receiver depth, especially when you've got a guy like Chris Godwin coming off the torn ACL, when you've got Julio Jones with his injury history, Mike Evans, whenever he's playing Marshawn Lattimore, always a chance he gets suspended. So, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Tom Brady has started slow this season, and we might not actually get to see the real Tom Brady until he gets all of those weapons back this season.
Yeah, but they've also been dealing obviously with the offensive line injuries. Gio Bernard just ended up going on IR with an ankle injury. I did love watching on Sunday with Mike Evans yelling at the ref after the fight. That's Tom Brady. What do you want me to do? I mean, it's a great video. I mean, I kind of agree with him, but these two teams do play again in week 13 on Monday Night Football, I should add. So we'll see them once again. I feel like the suspension should be the next time you have to play them, you're at, not the next game. But they'll play again here this year in week 13. I'm sure everyone will be keeping an eye on that matchup whenever the time comes. Let's talk about the Patriots, a team you know pretty well. A bit of a straightforward question, because I know they won on Sunday, but I feel like this offense is just not a fun offense to watch. I mean, like, what have you seen from them through 2 weeks with this Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, Bill Belichick ran offense?
It's interesting. In week 1, I feel like Mac Jones played pretty well, but maybe the play calling wasn't there. The offensive line struggled a little bit. Not the greatest performance from some of the skill position players, and they lost to the Miami Dolphins. And week 2 was kind of a role reversal there, where I didn't have much of a problem with the play calling from Matt Patricia. And then, whether Bill Belichick and Joe Judge are helping him out there as well. I thought that the wide receivers, for the most part, played pretty well. Devontae Adams struggled. Some of the tight ends struggled. And the offensive line held up well. But Mac Jones was the one who really struggled, which was a bit of a surprise given what we saw from Mac Jones last season as a rookie. He was far and away the best rookie quarterback in the NFL last year, and that has not carried through to year 2 now. And I think that, over the course of the offseason, I warned about this a little bit, saying that we'll probably see some progression out of the other rookie quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence will probably get better this season. Everyone expected Trey Lance to get better before the injury. Everyone expected Zach Wilson to get better before his injury, Justin Fields. But Mac Jones was the one where I was saying, I'm not sure if we'll see regression, but we might see him stay on that same plane, just because you lose Josh McDaniels, you lose a lot of the offensive coaches. They didn't upgrade that much offensively. And now I think that we're starting to see that a little bit. I do believe that the Patriots offense will get better because Mac Jones will get better, but it's been a slow start. And it's been interesting for me to see just the fact that in week 1, it wasn't Mac Jones. Here in week 2, it was Mac Jones. If everything can come together, we're probably still only looking at an average offense in the NFL, if we're being honest. Offensive line is decent. The offensive playmakers are not overly strong, and they're doing some weird things with snap counts at wide receiver right now too, where Kendrick Bourne, who was the second leading receiver on the team last year, he was their highest graded wide receiver, now essentially sharing 4th wide receiver snaps with Lil Jordan Humphrey. When the Patriots are in a running situation, Lil Jordan Humphrey is on the field as a run blocker. When they're not, it's Kendrick Bourne, but those guys are playing behind Jacoby Myers, Devontae Parker, and Nelson Aguilar right now. We'll see how everything shakes out, but just seems like things are unsettled right now on the Patriots offense.
Right. I was actually curious about Kendrick Bourne, because you mentioned how good he was last year. We're not seeing him on the field that much. Is that a Matt Patricia thing, or is there a deeper reasoning behind it?
He had a strange offseason where during joint practices with the Carolina Panthers, he got kicked out of practice for fighting. So he loses one practice there. And then before the preseason game against the Carolina Panthers, he's late to a meeting. He's in the parking lot when it's starting. He's just barely late. He gets sent home, and then that's essentially a suspension from the Patriots because he was not able to play in that preseason game against the Panthers, had to stay home, had a little bit of a rebound week, it seemed like, with joint practice against the Raiders and everything. But I'd say that in a new offense with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge now in charge, it's easy for those types of things to get you to fall out of favor when you have other starting caliber wide receivers around you. And that's what the Patriots have. Jacoby Myers is a proven starting wide receiver. Devontae Parker is, Nelson Aguilar is, Little Jordan Humphrey has impressed them. So it's not as if it's a situation like the Giants where you've got Richie James and David Sills playing above you. You've got pretty capable wide receivers. So those small little things, I think, can force you to fall out of favor with new coaches. I think this would probably be a different story if Josh McDaniels was still there. I do know that Mac Jones likes Kendrick Bourne. I know that Bill Belichick likes Kendrick Bourne. That's why you saw his snaps jump from 2 in week 1 all the way up to 23 or so last week. I think that we continue to see those snaps rise. And if he can play well, then that's really what's going to afford him more playing time. But I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a loaded wide receiver core, but there are a lot of starting capable players in the Patriots offense. When you throw in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith at tight end, when you throw in Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson at running back, there's only so many players who can share the field at once.
One more thing on the Patriots here, because you mentioned there at the end, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, both of them get signed to these big contracts last off season. I don't feel like they're living up to those contracts, and they're not really doing much in that offense. Is that something you could see changing, or we're moving forward with all these receivers and those guys are a bit of an afterthought?
Well, it was interesting. In week 1, the Patriots were in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field almost half of the snaps. It was, I believe, 26 out of 56 snaps. They were in 12 personnel. So Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry were sharing the field quite a bit in week 1. That dropped way down in week 2, where I think that they were only in 12 personnel for 1 snap. And I know I keep bringing up Little Jordan Humphrey. He's kind of this like weird little X factor where like that matters much more than he should in the Patriots offense. But the Patriots were running in, like I said, in running situations, 11 personnel with Little Jordan Humphrey essentially being this kind of hybrid wide receiver / tight end. He's played 80% of his snaps this season as a run blocker, not running routes, blocking guys. So I'm not sure why the Patriots are favoring having Little Jordan Humphrey on the field over guys like Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. I think one reason for that is they might just simply think that Humphrey is a better blocker than a guy like Hunter Henry, who's never really been that good of a blocker throughout his NFL career. So there was one snap that someone put out there on Twitter the other day of Hunter Henry really whiffing on a block against the Steelers in week 2. So I don't know. They're a matchup offense. They change their game plan every single week. So there's going to be times when they're in 12 personnel a lot. There's going to be times when they're in 11 personnel a lot. And it's just going to be very unpredictable. So I think those tight ends wind up getting involved, but it won't be significantly on a week-to-week basis where you're seeing both tight ends on the field for 100% of snaps.
Yep, and they have the Baltimore Ravens coming in this week to town, a team that we just saw get kind of destroyed by that Dolphins team, including their tight ends, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. They were making plays as well. What am I saying? Yeah, kind of confusing what I'm trying to say up here. But yeah, they have the Baltimore Ravens coming into town. They have good tight ends. The Patriots have tight ends that are not working out right now. That's what I was trying to get to. Anyways, there we go. Anyways, let me get to the 0-2 teams here in the NFL. The Raiders, Bengals, Titans, all playoff teams last year are 0-2. The Panthers and Falcons in the NFC are 0-2 as well. Which ones do you think have the best chance of turning this around here? Historically, 0-2 teams usually do not make the playoffs, but these are some pretty decent teams there.
Yeah, I would definitely favor the AFC teams in this scenario. I think that the AFC teams have a much better chance of rebounding, making the playoffs. People around the league still believe in the Bengals. I'll say that. I think that everyone realizes now that they've started 0-2 that there's a chance that they miss the playoffs, that this is a very strong AFC, and that they're still, I believe, the 7th highest favorites to win a Super Bowl in the AFC. So Vegas basically still has them in the playoffs right now, but they could very easily drop from that spot. I still think that the Raiders have a lot of talent. They are kind of a skeleton crew on offense and defense right now, where they have talent. They don't have a lot of depth behind that talent. We just saw them trade for Patriots offensive tackle Justin Herron, so that helps a little bit on the offensive line, gives them a little bit more depth there, but I would start getting a little bit concerned. They've already started 0-2. They haven't had injuries pile up, and once injuries do pile up, that could wind up going the wrong way there for the Raiders. And I'll just say on the Titans, people inside that building still believe in that team. They believe that that division is wide open because it is. The Jacksonville Jaguars currently are leading the division at 1-1. The Indianapolis Colts have not got off to a good start. So I still think that the Titans could wind up winning that division just because of how weak the AFC South is. So I don't know. I probably still believe in the Bengals the most simply because I thought they had a good offseason. They made the Super Bowl last year. They should have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's just about adjusting to what defenses are throwing out at them. Succeeding a little bit more on short passes because teams are really doing a good job of taking away the deep ball from Joe Burrow. And I think that they can figure it out. So as far as all the 0-2 teams, probably have the most faith in the Bengals. After that, I still think the Titans could win their division there as well.
When you look at all these 0-2 teams, like the Raiders, they should have won against Arizona. The Bengals really should have beat the Steelers in week 1. The Titans should have beat the Giants in week 1. The Panthers were in it in both games. The Falcons probably should have beat the Saints in week 1. I'm looking at a team that isn't necessarily 0-2, but they are winless, and that's the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
Week 1 was bad against the Texans. Week 2 was even worse against the Jaguars. Jaguars have now won 8 straight games against the Colts in Jacksonville. Are you panicking with them? I know you mentioned the AFC South just now. It's a pretty bad division looking at it, but are you in a bit of a panic mode of how they've played? Because now the hard part of the schedule comes. The Texans and Jaguars are supposed to be the easy part. Do you feel a bit of a concern here with this team?
There's a concern there. I think there's a bit of a concern because everyone seemed to have really high hopes for Matt Ryan this season. Matt Ryan's getting up there in age. He wasn't quite the same quarterback over the last few years with the Atlanta Falcons. So I think that there's a possibility that things just go south there for the Colts, that things do not go well. Certainly the light at the end of the tunnel there, the hope there is that they had maybe their best 2 players or 2 of their best players out in week 2, and wide receiver Michael Pittman and linebacker Shaq Leonard. Also, Alec Pierce missed that game with a concussion. So, there wasn't a lot of weapons for Matt Ryan to be throwing to. The defense obviously misses Shaq Leonard. I think that once they get those pieces back, they could certainly start looking a lot better, start looking like the team everyone expected them to be, because there's really no reason why they should be worse than they were last season unless Matt Ryan just, is washed basically, which I don't think he is, but I do think that there's some concern there with his age, being in a new system, everything going around there. So I don't know. They're another team that it's tough to write them off playing in the AFC South just because that division is so wide open. They still could wind up making the playoffs, but I'm also not sure if just making the playoffs and winning the AFC South would be enough for the expectations that were coming in this season for Indianapolis.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you mentioned the guys who are injured, but I feel like they should also look back at bringing maybe Eric Fisher back for another year at left tackle. They probably need another wide receiver there, especially when Pittman is out. I mean, it's a struggle. T.Y. Hilton is still available. I know he's not the same player he once was, but the veteran leadership, bring that spark back to the team. I think that would definitely help. And again, you mentioned they are in the AFC South, and it's a pretty poor division so far. So I'm not fully panicking yet, but definitely a very concerning start to the year for them. All right, I want to thank you for coming on. Everyone can follow you on Twitter. It is at Doug Kyed, a pretty simple one, unlike mine. And everyone can also check you out on PFF Wire. It is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the PFF YouTube channel, also on every podcast platform there is now. And you guys go through all the news analysis, you and Brad Spielberger. So definitely check that out as well here at PFF. Check out all your articles at pff.com as well. And hopefully we'll have you on more often moving forward. So we'll do that as well. Thanks for coming on.